Camilla Hart sat motionless in her office, the glow of the desk lamp casting long, weary shadows across the room. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional creak of old hardwood beneath her heels and the soft ticking of the wall clock that had once belonged to her father's law practice. The night outside was silent, the Boston skyline glittering coldly through the rain-speckled windows of Hart & Wells LLP, a firm she had poured her heart and soul into, and which now hung on the edge of ruin. Stacks of overdue bills lay open across her desk, their red ink warnings practically screaming at her. Legal notices, loan repayment demands, final warnings, and beneath them all, an unopened letter from the Massachusetts General Billing Department. Her father's latest medical expenses. She couldn't bring herself to open it. She already knew the number would be devastating. Camilla let out a slow breath and leaned back in her chair, pressing 2 fingers against her temples as if she could hold her crumbling world together by sheer will. She was 33 years old, a Harvard law graduate, founder of her own boutique firm, a fighter, a survivor. But tonight, none of that mattered. She was losing everything. Her practice, her reputation, the promise she'd made to her dying father and her younger sister. And she was out of options. She reached for her phone and stared at the screen, hovering over Rachel's contact photo. Her sister had no idea how bad things were. She was finishing her 2nd year at Columbia, happily unaware that Camilla had drained her personal savings to cover the last semester. Their father, Robert, still believed the firm was thriving. Camilla had kept the illusion alive with a smile, a steady voice, and a carefully curated lie. A knock on the glass door jolted her. She frowned. It was well past office hours. Only the security guard knew she was here, and he never knocked. Camilla rose slowly, heels clicking on polished wood, and opened the door. Standing there in the hallway, like a ghost materialized from ambition itself, was Grayson Wolfe. Even in the dim corridor light, he looked unnervingly composed. Dark suit, silver cufflinks, no tie. His dark hair was slightly tousled from the wind. His presence filled the space before he even stepped inside. She blinked, startled. "Mr. Wolfe?" "Miss Hart," he said, his voice even and low. "May I come in?" She stepped aside, cautious but curious. "To what do I owe this very unexpected visit?" He entered with silent precision, glancing once around her office. His gaze briefly flicked across the bills on her desk before returning to her face. "I won't take much of your time." "That's good," Camilla replied, folding her arms across her chest. "Because as you can probably guess, I don't have much of it left." Grayson offered a faint smile, but there was no humor in it. He reached into his coat and produced a thick manila envelope. Then he set it gently on her desk like it was something sacred or dangerous. Camilla stared at it. "What's this?" "A contract," he said. "A very specific one. Marriage. You and me. 6 months." Her breath caught. She laughed, short and disbelieving. "Excuse me? It's not a joke, Miss Hart. You want to marry me?" "Legally, yes. Publicly. Not romantically, not emotionally. 6 months. After that, it's over." She shook her head. "Why me?" "Because you're perfect for what I need." Grayson moved with the ease of someone used to commanding rooms, even ones that didn't belong to him. He sat without waiting to be asked. Camilla didn't move. She felt as though reality had cracked at the seams. "My father passed away 2 weeks ago," he continued. "His will includes a clause. I must be legally married in order to retain the chairmanship of Wolfe International. Otherwise, the board holds a vote of succession. There are members eager to replace me. I need time, 6 months, to solidify my position. After that, they can't touch me." "You could marry anyone," she said, still stunned. "Why not some actress or socialite? Or a desperate heiress?" "Because they would be liabilities," he replied calmly. "You are not. You're smart, respected, no scandals, you have integrity. That's what I need." "And what would I get in return?" He opened the envelope and slid a smaller document toward her, an account summary. Her eyes widened at the balance. It wasn't just enough to save her firm. It was enough to pay off every debt, every hospital bill, and then some. Camilla's mouth went dry. "Everything you need," he said. "A clean slate. Your firm, your father's treatment, your sister's education. No strings after the 6th month. The money is wired upon contract execution. Your name remains untouched in all my company's dealings." Her heart pounded. For a moment, the world faded. and all she could see were the faces of the people she loved. Her father still smiling through pain. Her sister so bright, so full of dreams. She'd promised them both she'd keep everything together, that she would protect them. But how do you protect the people you love when the world keeps burning down around you? She looked back at Grayson, her voice barely above a whisper. Why now? Why come here? He met her gaze. Because you're smart enough to understand the value of desperate timing. And because whether you say yes or no, I knew you'd appreciate the decency of an honest offer. Camilla stood still for a long moment. Then carefully, she picked up the contract. I have 3 conditions, she said, his brow lifted. No physical intimacy. No interference in my professional work. And when it's over, you vanish from my life entirely. No media stunts. No loopholes. He nodded. Done. She walked to the corner cabinet, pulled out a pen, and returned to her desk. Her fingers hovered over the signature line for a beat too long. Then she signed. The pen moved smoothly across the paper, but each letter felt like it cost a piece of her soul. When she was finished, she looked up. Her voice was steady. You may be buying my name, Mr. Wolf, but you will never own me. Grayson took the contract without ceremony, slid it back into the envelope, and stood. For a moment, he looked at her, longer than necessary. You're wrong, Miss Hart, he said quietly. I don't want to own you. I only need your shadow. And then he left. Camilla stood alone in the middle of her collapsing kingdom, the echo of his footsteps fading down the hall, the ink on her signature, still drying. She sat slowly, the walls around her pressing closer. The contract was done. The money would arrive in the morning. She had just saved her firm, saved her father, saved her sister's future. And yet she felt as though she had lost something she couldn't quite name. A soft vibration hummed from her phone. Rachel, probably. Or the hospice. She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her voice memo app and recorded a whisper only she would hear. This is not love. This is survival. And I will survive. She hit save, set down the phone, and stared at the door where Grayson Wolf had just vanished into the night. Her new life had begun, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The elevator opened with a hushed chime, revealing the top floor corridor of the Beacon Hill penthouse. Camilla Hart stepped out, her footsteps muffled by the thick grey carpet beneath her. She pulled her suitcase behind her, a navy roller bag she'd owned since law school, the same one she'd once wheeled into job interviews full of hope. Now, it held her entire life in a handful of carefully chosen items. The hallway was quiet, tastefully decorated, impersonal. The kind of space where silence was a design feature, not an accident. A single polished black door waited at the end, already slightly ajar. She approached, her chest tightening, heart caught somewhere between resolve and regret. She knocked once unnecessarily, then pushed the door open. Grayson Wolf stood by the massive windows, hands in his pockets, back to her. Outside, the city shimmered in glass and light, as if Boston had been polished overnight into something unrecognizably perfect. The skyline stretched far beyond the Charles River, indifferent to who had arrived or who had been left behind. He turned slightly when he heard her enter. You're early, he said, voice steady. I didn't think punctuality would be a problem, she replied. He glanced at the suitcase and nodded toward the left hallway. Your room is the second door. Mine is across the hall. The closet's been stocked. Sophia arranged the wardrobe for upcoming appearances, galas, dinners, board events. She also left you a list of the expectations from the PR team. You'll find it on your dresser. Camilla didn't respond. She simply rolled her suitcase toward the hallway, her heels echoing faintly behind her. Each step felt heavy, like she was dragging something larger than luggage, something invisible that refused to be left behind. The room he had prepared for her was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sheer white curtains that moved with the wind from a small cracked open window, a king-size bed with crisp ivory linens, and a sitting area styled like a page out of a design magazine. Everything gleamed, flawless, sterile, untouched. There were no books on the shelves, no photos in frames, no trace that any real person had ever lived here. Camilla didn't unpack. Not yet. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked around slowly, taking in the perfection, the coldness, the weight of the silence. This wasn't a home, it was a stage. She rose and walked to the window, staring out at the city. From here, the world looked organized, clean, in control, just like Grayson. But she knew better. Nothing was ever that seamless. Not grief, not business, not survival. Camilla opened her suitcase. From between folded clothes, she pulled out a small silver picture frame. Inside, a photo. Her father and Rachel sitting on a bench in Boston Common, laughing at something out of frame. The three of them had gone to feed the ducks that day. She had taken the picture. She placed the frame on the nightstand. "You're here because you made a promise," she whispered to herself. "You said you protect them, now do it." Later that evening, Camilla found her way to the kitchen, unsure of what she was looking for. Maybe just motion. Something to make her feel like a person again, not a piece of a contract. The kitchen was sleek, modern, and dispassionate, like a showroom. She opened the refrigerator. Stocked. Not lovingly, but efficiently. Perfect rows of fruit, pre-cut vegetables, single-serve protein packs. Nothing looked like it had ever been touched by human hands. She scanned the shelves and found a half-empty bag of dry pasta in the cabinet, likely overlooked by the house staff. She boiled water, chopped a tomato, and decided to cook. Not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because it reminded her she was still alive. She had just finished plating her dinner when footsteps approached. Grayson appeared in the doorway, sleeves rolled, tie removed. His jacket was gone. His posture, though still regal, was less rigid than earlier. His eyes landed on the plate in her hand. "You cooked?" he asked, genuinely surprised. Camilla didn't look up. "It's edible. You don't have to panic." "I wasn't. Just surprised. Most people in this house don't use the stove." "Well, I'm not most people," she said, setting her plate on the marble island. "And I don't do well sitting in gilded cages with nothing but silence to keep me company." He lingered in the doorway, as if debating whether to enter a room that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Finally, he stepped inside, moved toward the other side of the island, and leaned against the counter. "You know, you don't have to act the part when we're here," he said. "There are no photographers in my kitchen." "Funny," she murmured, twirling her fork. "Because it feels like everything here is pretending to be something." He studied her quietly, and for the first time since she met him, his gaze didn't feel assessing. It felt curious. "You really don't care who I am," he said after a beat. "That I'm Grayson Wolfe." "I care that you're the man who bought 6 months of my life," she replied calmly. Not much else. The tension that followed wasn't sharp, it was still. Dense. Honest. Grayson crossed his arms. "Most people I deal with bend. You don't." Camilla gave a faint smile. "Most people you deal with probably never had to scrape for dignity." He didn't answer. Not right away. Then quietly he asked, "Why did you say yes?" Her hand paused over her plate. "For my father," she said. "He's dying. And for my sister, who deserves a chance to finish school without watching." The ground fall out from beneath her. He nodded, as if he had expected the answer, but hearing it spoken aloud shifted something. She looked at him then, really looked. There was a tiredness in his eyes he hadn't let show before, a tension in his jaw that never quite released. And in that moment she realized something. For all his control and wealth and power, he was just as trapped in this arrangement as she was. Not because he was weak, but because something inside him had hardened a long time ago, and he didn't know how to thaw it. When she returned to her room that night, she didn't sleep right away. She stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the wind outside and the stillness within. Across the hallway, behind another door, a man who once commanded boardrooms and empires was probably doing the same. She got up once, opened the door to the hallway, and stood there, between two closed doors. Then she returned to bed. Not because she didn't want to ask what had broken him, but because it was still too soon to ask what had broken herself. And somewhere in the penthouse's perfect stillness, two strangers pretended to be partners, and neither of them realized just how much pretending would come to cost them. The evening air in Boston was brisk, laced with the faint salt of the harbor and the perfume of early spring. Camilla Hart stood before the floor-length mirror in the dressing suite of the penthouse, the gown draped over her body like liquid shadow. Deep emerald satin clung to her waist, falling in soft folds to the floor. Her hair swept into a sleek twist revealed the curve of her neck and the quiet strength of her posture. The dress was beautiful. It was also a costume. She had rehearsed her expression, gracious but reserved, polite but distant. This was not a night for self-expression. It was a performance. Their first. In the living room, Grayson Wolfe waited, impeccably dressed in a tailored black tuxedo. He looked like he belonged in the pages of a financial magazine. Cool, composed, the embodiment of corporate success. When she walked in, he turned to face her. His eyes paused on her for a second too long. "You look suitable," he said, his voice low-clipped. Camilla arched a brow. "Just suitable?" Grayson didn't respond. Not with words, but his gaze lingered, and that was enough. In the car, they said little. The silence between them was not strained but intentional, like two people conserving energy for the roles they were about to play. Outside, the city moved in flashes. Taxi lights, shop fronts, reflections in glass. Camilla stared out the window, her hands resting on her lap, steady but cold. They arrived at the gala, an annual charity event hosted by Boston's legal elite to raise funds for youth mentorship in underserved neighborhoods. Camilla had once dreamed of attending as a guest speaker. Tonight, she was attending as someone's wife. Inside, the grand ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Marble columns stretched toward a ceiling painted with stars. Conversations hummed beneath classical music, laughter punctuated by champagne flutes. Wealth moved through the room like a current, seen, felt, and rarely questioned. Grayson offered her his arm. She took it, her hand feather light against his. They walked through the crowd together, smiles calibrated to perfection. People turned to look, some whispered, others merely observed. "Grayson Wolfe," said a man near the orchestra, offering his hand. "I wasn't sure we'd see you tonight." "Neither was I," Grayson replied smoothly, his tone polished. "And who is this?" the man asked, turning toward Camilla. She smiled. "Camilla Hart." A pause. Recognition flickered in the man's eyes, but not from her professional work. Only the rumors swirling around Grayson's sudden marriage. "A pleasure," he said, then excused himself. Camilla exhaled quietly. She could feel the judgment beneath the politeness, the way eyes flicked to her left hand, to the way she held Grayson's arm but did not lean into him. The performance had only just begun, and then came the voice she had hoped not to hear. Well, said a woman behind them, soft and saccharine. "Grayson Wolfe, I thought the only thing you committed to was a quarterly report." Camilla turned. Lana Delacroix. She was everything the room had expected Grayson to marry. Sculpted, icy, magnetic. Her scarlet dress clung to her body like a challenge. Her lipstick matched the color of ambition. "Lana," Grayson said neutral. She kissed the air near his cheek, then turned to Camilla with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And you must be the wife." Camilla extended a hand. Camilla Hart." "Oh yes," Lana said. "I heard you're a lawyer. Surprising, really. I thought Grayson preferred women more accommodating to this world." Her smile never wavered. Camilla's did. "I suppose that depends on how you define accommodating," she said evenly. "I find that character often reveals itself when comfort is removed." A ripple of laughter echoed from nearby. Several people turned, pretending not to listen. Lana's eyes narrowed. "Of course. Well, best of luck. It can be overwhelming adjusting to all this." Camilla leaned in slightly, her voice soft but sharp. "I'm not here to adjust. I'm here because I choose to be." She turned back to Grayson. "Shall we?" They walked away, the room parting for them like water. Camilla could feel the shift in energy. She hadn't just survived Lana's confrontation. She'd reclaimed ground. At the edge of the ballroom, near the glass doors leading to the terrace, Camilla stopped. "I handled that the way you wanted," she said, folding her arms. Grayson's brow furrowed. "I didn't want anything." Camilla tilted her head. "No? Then why bring me here, dressed like this, paraded beside you like some accessory to be admired?" He said nothing. She continued, quieter now. "You want me to play the perfect partner. Fine, but don't expect me to smile at women who think I'm beneath you." "You didn't smile," he said. "You fought." She looked away. The music inside swelled, a string quartet rising into something plaintive and rich. "I've spent a long time fighting," she whispered. "I'm tired of pretending." They stood in silence for a while. On the terrace, the wind was cool against her bare arms. Grayson shrugged off his jacket and placed it gently over her shoulders. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured. "I know." Back inside, the crowd was shifting, murmuring again. Someone had taken the stage. Camilla didn't. "Care," She stared out at the city, the harbor lights blinking like signals from another life. Grayson stepped closer, not touching, but near. "You were right," he said. "About this world. It likes masks. But so do I." She turned to him. "You hide behind suits and silence. I hide behind competence. But neither of us signed up for this for truth." "No," he admitted. "But that doesn't mean we can't find it." Camilla met his eyes. For once there was no distance in them, no armor. Just exhaustion and something dangerously close to longing. "Why do you care how I handled her?" she asked. Grayson's answer came slowly. "Because you weren't supposed to matter. But you do." She looked down, startled by how much that admission shook her. Then came the rush, camera flashes, murmurs rising. Reporters swept in from the ballroom, their voices loud, questions sharp. "Mr. Wolf, how did you meet your wife?" "Mrs. Wolf, did you marry for love or legacy?" The barrage was relentless. Camilla froze, smile stretched thin. She didn't know how to answer without unraveling everything. Then Grayson stepped forward. "She's not here for your headlines," he said, voice low but commanding. "She's here because she has more grace than all of you combined." He wrapped an arm gently around her, turning them away from the cameras, shielding her with the ease of someone who'd learned how to hold a storm at bay. They moved through, the crowd like a wall unto themselves. Outside, on the balcony, Camilla finally breathed again. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself until she was alone with him. "You didn't have to do that," she said, voice hoarse. "I know," he said, "but I didn't want you to have to." She turned to look at him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't posturing. For once, he wasn't pretending. Neither was she. And for a moment, they were just two people caught in a performance they hadn't meant to perfect. Two actors breaking character. Two strangers whose roles were starting to feel dangerously real. Camilla didn't say thank you, but she didn't walk away either. And in Grayson's quiet presence, she found, for the first time in a long time, that silence didn't have to feel like loneliness. Sometimes it could feel like the beginning of something unspoken, something true. The phone call came just before sunset, breaking the quiet rhythm of Camilla's evening. She had been sorting through firm documents on her laptop, half-focused, her thoughts trailing to the events of the gala 2 nights prior. The edge in the assistant's voice pulled her back to full attention. "Ms. Hart," the woman said. "Mr. Wolf's been injured. It's not serious, but he refused to go to the hospital. He's on his way back now." Camilla's body tensed. "What happened?" There was a structural failure during a routine safety inspection at Wolf Tower. He pulled a junior analyst out of the way when the elevator door mechanism collapsed. A metal bar caught him in the shoulder. She stood up slowly. "You said he refused treatment?" "Yes. He insisted he was fine." But Camilla was already grabbing her coat. By the time Grayson returned to the penthouse, the early evening had deepened into shadows. He walked through the front door with his shirt sleeve torn, the white fabric streaked with red. His movements were controlled but slower than usual, as if gravity had gained weight. Camilla met him at the entrance. "You look like hell." "I've been told worse," he muttered. He was pale, the tension in his jaw more pronounced than usual. But it wasn't the wound that struck her. It was the way he avoided her eyes like he didn't know how to receive concern. "I'll get the first aid kit," she said. He didn't stop her. In the kitchen, Camilla laid out the essentials with practiced ease: disinfectant, gauze, medical tape, gloves. When she returned, Grayson had settled on the edge of the sectional sofa, his left hand gripping the torn edge of his shirt. "Take it off," she said. He looked up. "Excuse me?" "The shirt," she clarified. "I need to clean the wound." Hesitated for a moment, as if the act of undressing, even for medical reasons, felt like too much exposure. Then with a small sigh, he pulled the fabric over his head and let it fall. Camilla's breath caught before she could stop it. The injury was clean but deep, just beneath the collarbone, a thin slash of angry red flesh. But what stunned her wasn't the wound. It was what lay beneath it. The faint outlines of old scars crisscrossed his torso. Not from surgery, not from anything accidental. They looked like the kind born of years and pain. She said nothing, her fingers suddenly less steady. As she soaked gauze in antiseptic, Grayson noticed her hesitation. "They're old," he said, his voice unusually soft. "You don't need to ask." "I wasn't going to," she replied, though her chest felt tight. She cleaned the cut carefully, pressing the gauze gently against his skin. He didn't flinch. but she could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. "You should have gone to the hospital," she murmured. "I didn't want the board to see it as a liability. We're days from the next vote." She glanced up, incredulous. "You took a metal bar to the shoulder and your concern is shareholder optics?" He gave a faint, bitter smile. "Always." She taped the last section of gauze, smoothing the edges. Her hand lingered a moment longer than necessary before she pulled away. "You're running a fever," she said, brushing the back of her hand across his forehead. "You're burning up." "I'm fine." "You're not," she said firmly. "Lie down." He didn't argue. Grayson stretched across the couch, his body visibly relaxing once he stopped resisting gravity. Camilla disappeared briefly and returned with a damp cloth and a thin blanket. She sat beside him, adjusting the cloth on his forehead, watching the way his eyes fluttered closed. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know." She didn't know why she stayed. Maybe it was the exhaustion etched into his face, or the way he hadn't known how to ask for help. Maybe it was because she recognized something in him. A kind of quiet breaking she had once hidden behind a perfect posture and a curated smile. An hour passed. The fever deepened, and Grayson drifted in and out of sleep. At one point, his head turned toward her, his features tightening, his voice breaking through the silence in a soft murmur. "Don't go. Mom, please." Camilla froze. His hand reached for the edge of the blanket like a child afraid of being left. His face was twisted in pain, not from the wound on his shoulder, but from something deeper, far older. She didn't speak. Instead, she placed her hand gently on his, anchoring him to the present. "I'm here," she whispered, not knowing why it mattered that he heard it, only that he did. His hand relaxed. His breathing steadied. That night, Camilla didn't leave. She remained beside him, adjusting the compress, refilling water, watching over him like she had so many nights with her father. When the chemo made him delirious, when Rachel was too young to understand what it meant to be a caretaker, she had forgotten what it felt like to be needed without being asked. Sometime past midnight, Grayson stirred again, this time more lucid. He looked up at her groggily. "You stayed." She shrugged, trying to sound casual. "I didn't want you dying on the couch and voiding the contract." A faint smile touched his lips. How pragmatic. She handed him a glass of water. He sat up slowly, wincing as the wound pulled taut beneath the bandage. "Thank you," he said. It was simple, but different from the clipped gratitude he usually offered. This time the words felt earned. Camilla stood, gathering the supplies. "You should rest more. I'll come check in the morning." As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "I meant it." She paused. "Meant what?" "The thank you." She didn't respond. She didn't know how to. Back in her room, Camilla lay on the bed, eyes wide open. She could still hear his voice, fragile in sleep, trembling with a child's plea. She could still feel the weight of his hand relaxing beneath hers. She thought of the scars on his body, the ones he didn't explain, and she thought of the ones she carried, the betrayal that had nearly destroyed her, the fear that loving anyone again would be like walking into a house already on fire. But something had shifted tonight. Not in him, in her. Grayson Wolfe, for all his control and silence, had let something slip, something unguarded, something human. She didn't want to name it. Not yet. She simply placed the memory beside her like a candle on a long dark windowsill. In the other room, Grayson lay staring at the ceiling, the fever breaking, his mind drifting. He barely remembered what he had said, but he remembered the comfort of her voice, the steadiness of her hands, the scent of rosemary in her hair. He touched the edge of the bandage, not out of pain, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had chosen to stay, not for the contract, not for the company, but for him. And that terrified him more than anything. The days after Grayson's injury passed in a strange blur, half routine, half something unnamed. The wound on his shoulder healed slowly, but that wasn't what unsettled Camilla. It was the way his presence lingered even when he wasn't in the room. The way silence between them no longer felt sharp but charged. The way she had started to memorize the sound of his footsteps, the cadence of his voice when he wasn't performing. On paper, everything remained unchanged. They played the role of husband and wife in public, attended board meetings, philanthropic, luncheons, even Sunday brunch with a few of Grayson's allies in the legal circuit. Camilla had grown skilled at the performance, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her laughter just right, her answers rehearsed but never hollow. But behind closed doors, lines were blurring. They had begun to share coffee in the morning. First, in silence, then in quiet conversation. They moved around each other in the kitchen like they'd lived together for years. Camilla found herself looking up when he entered a room. Grayson, in turn, stopped hiding behind emails and late meetings. He showed up, he noticed things, he asked questions. It was a Tuesday morning when it all came undone. Camilla stood at the window of the penthouse library, scrolling through a legal memo when she heard the click of the door behind her. "I need your help," Grayson said. She turned, surprised. He rarely asked for help unless it was strictly business. "With?" He held up a tie, half knotted. "I never learned to do this one-handed." She arched a brow. "And Sophia couldn't assist?" "She's out picking up documents for the shareholder review," he replied, stepping closer. Camilla set her folder aside and took the tie from him. As she raised her hands to the collar of his shirt, something in her chest fluttered. He smelled faintly of cedarwood and coffee. His face was close, his jaw tense, but his eyes, they watched her. She looped the silk fabric, adjusting the knot carefully. Her fingers brushed against his neck. The contact was brief, but it felt electric. "You're holding your breath," she murmured without thinking. "So are you," he replied. Her hands paused at the knot. She met his gaze, steady, unreadable. "It's just a tie, Grayson." "No, it's not." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was aching, full, unspoken. Then a knock at the door broke the moment. Grayson stepped back quickly. Camilla turned toward the sound, grateful and disoriented. It was the courier dropping off contracts. Camilla returned to her reading, heart pounding, but the air had shifted and she knew nothing would quite settle back into place. That night, Camilla lay in bed with her lamp still on. The contract they had signed months ago now felt like a trap of their own making. Not because it bound them legally, but because neither of them had counted on what was growing in the quiet spaces. Not attraction, not lust, but something slower, something deeper. Care. She thought about the tie. The moment his skin brushed hers, the fact that she'd wanted to linger, and she hated that part of her had started to want more. The following morning, they were scheduled for a joint interview with Boston Edge, a strategically timed feature to highlight Grayson's commitment to family values before the board vote. Camilla had reviewed the questions ahead of time. She knew exactly what was expected, what to say, what not to reveal, but nothing prepared her for the question that came midway through the shoot. How did you two fall in love? Grayson looked at her. Camilla smiled politely. We met through mutual friends, she said. At a fundraiser. I was there to represent Hart and Wells. He was avoiding reporters. The interviewer laughed. That sounds like him? And we didn't get along at first, she added carefully. That's true, Grayson said, a hint of a smirk on his lips. But, she continued, meeting his eyes, he surprised me. Underneath the arrogance, he was generous and lonely and real. The interviewer blinked. That's quite an answer. Camilla flushed slightly but didn't retract it. She hadn't planned to say it. But it wasn't a lie. And you? The interviewer asked Grayson. What made you fall for her? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, she wasn't impressed by my name. She didn't care what I could offer. She asked the right questions. She saw past the title. And she stayed, even when I gave her reasons not to. The words landed softly, but they struck something hard inside Camilla. After the shoot, neither of them spoke. In the car ride home, they sat in a silence that felt heavier than any argument. She retreated to her room immediately, closed the door, leaned her forehead against the wood. She stayed. That's what he had said. And it was true. She had stayed that night when he burned with fever. She had stayed when he didn't know how to ask. She had stayed not because of the contract, but because something in her had needed to. The problem was, she didn't know if she could keep staying without falling. Later that night, she found herself on the rooftop terrace. The city lights sprawled below, and the wind tugged at her robe. She stood at the railing, eyes unfocused. I thought I'd find you here, Grayson said behind her. She didn't turn. I needed air. He stepped beside her. So did I. They stood together, watching the skyline blink like constellations made by man. You meant what you said, she said after a moment. In the interview, he nodded. I did. Why? Because it's true. She finally looked at him. You know this wasn't supposed to happen. I know, but it is. He didn't respond. His eyes were on her, steady, unreadable, soft. Camilla exhaled. This wasn't the deal. No, he said, but maybe the deal wasn't enough. She looked away, tears threatening the corners of her eyes. Don't do this if you don't. Mean it. I do mean it, he said quietly. That's the problem. Camilla turned to leave, but he caught her wrist, lightly, gently. You asked me once why I cared how you handled Lana, he said. I didn't answer you then. She swallowed hard. Tell me now. Because I've built empires, he said, but I've never seen someone walk into a world they don't belong to and hold their ground like it was their birthright. You didn't just fight for me. You reminded me who I used to be before I forgot. His voice cracked. You remind me what it's like to be human again. Camilla didn't speak. Couldn't. She stepped into him instead. Her forehead against his chest, his arms uncertain at first, then circling her, holding her like a man anchoring himself to the only thing left that felt real. And in that rooftop silence, surrounded by the hush of 1,000 windows glowing with lives not theirs, two strangers who had begun this as a transaction stood on the edge of something neither had intended. Not love, not yet, but something terrifyingly close, and neither one of them had the courage to name it. Camilla had never liked hospitals. They reminded her of endings, of sterile rooms filled with unanswered questions and the soft hiss of machines pretending to promise life. Now, sitting in one of those rooms again, all she could think about was how ironic it was, how you could take care of everyone else. Keep your life in order with meticulous precision and still fall apart without warning. It had started with a migraine, then nausea. Then the room tilted. The ground slipped. She woke up in a hospital bed with her sister Rachel clutching her hand, and the beeping of monitors tapping a rhythm against her ribs. You scared me, Rachel whispered. Her eyes were red. They said it was exhaustion, low blood sugar, dehydration. You've been pushing too hard. Camilla tried to speak, but her throat ached. She could only nod. You didn't even tell me you were working 16-hour days. Again, Rachel went on. And this marriage, this whole thing. Cam, are you okay? Camilla looked away. Her vision blurred, but not from the IV drip. I thought I was, she said hoarsely. I really thought I could handle everything. Rachel squeezed her hand tighter. You don't have to handle it alone. The door opened then, quiet but certain. Grayson. His presence filled the room without effort. No suit, no tie, just jeans, a dark jacket, and something in his eyes that was unrecognizably human. He looked at Rachel. Can I have a minute? Rachel hesitated, then nodded. I'll grab coffee. When she left, silence settled between them. Camilla couldn't meet his gaze. You passed out, he said, voice rough. No one called me until after you were admitted. I didn't want to cause a scene, she murmured. A scene? He moved closer. Camilla, you collapsed in court. She flinched. Don't make this bigger than it is. You fainted. You were unconscious. That is big. She finally looked at him, and what he saw there gutted him. The fragility beneath the armor, the effort it took for her to stay composed. She had held the world up with her bare hands, and now those hands were shaking. You can't keep doing this, he said more gently. You can't keep burning yourself to keep others warm. Her lip trembled just barely. It's not about being a martyr. Then what? It's about not letting things fall apart, she whispered. Not again. I watched my mother die piece by piece while my father fell into silence. I raised Rachel. I kept the firm alive when our partners bailed. I've never had the luxury of falling apart. Grayson stepped forward. And now? Her breath hitched. Now I don't know how to stop. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch achingly tender. You don't have to prove anything to me, he said. Or to the world. But I do, she whispered. Because I didn't come into your world equal. I came in as a pawn. A contract. The girl no one believed belonged. He bent lower until his forehead touched hers. You belonged the moment you didn't flinch, he said. The moment you looked every person in that boardroom in the eye and refused to shrink. Camilla exhaled, finally letting her head rest. Back against the pillow. I hate being weak. You're not weak, he said. You're just tired. A pause. Let me carry some of it. Her eyes filled. Why? She asked, voice cracking. Why now? He pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down. Because the first time I saw you, I thought you were a complication. A temporary answer to a long-term problem. But then you stayed when you didn't have to. You challenged me when no one else dared. You cared when it wasn't in your job description. And last night, when I realized you hadn't come home, he looked away, jaw tight. I panicked. Not because of the contract, but because the thought of this apartment without you in it. It felt unbearable. Camilla closed her eyes. Her hand slipped into his. He held it tightly, the way someone holds something they're terrified of losing. That night he stayed with her, not because he had to, because he wanted to. He made calls, cleared her calendar, arranged for Rachel to stay at the penthouse. He even brought her soup, though he had no idea how to make it, and sat beside her while she pretended it tasted fine. She slept deeply for the first time in weeks, and when she woke the next morning, he was still there in the chair, asleep with his head resting on the side of her bed. She watched him for a moment, heart thudding, and something in her cracked open. Not because he was perfect, but because he was trying, and maybe that was enough. When she was discharged 2 days later, she returned to the penthouse with a slower step and a heart both heavier and lighter than before. Grayson insisted she take the week off. She fought it, then relented. He brought her tea, set up movie nights, left notes on the kitchen counter in his awkward, slanted handwriting. Eat something, rest, call your dad. And then one morning, a bouquet of white tulips arrived on her nightstand. No note. Camilla knew it was him, because weeks ago during a lunch they shared by accident, she had mentioned her mother's love for tulips. No one else knew. That afternoon, as the sun poured golden light into the living room, Camilla found him standing by the window, deep in thought. She walked up behind him. Thank you for the flowers. He turned, surprised. I didn't sign anything. You didn't have to. A pause. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? That this is becoming real. He looked at her, his voice low. It already is. She stepped closer. I don't want to be your performance piece. You're not. I don't want to be your redemption project either. He reached out and touched her cheek. You're the only thing that's ever made me want to change. Not because I have to, but because I want to be better if it means standing beside you. Camilla inhaled sharply. She didn't have words. So she kissed him, softly, uncertainly, but wholly. It wasn't a kiss of triumph. It wasn't a kiss born of passion. It was surrender. And for the first time, neither of them pulled away. Camilla had once thought that clarity arrived like sunrise, gradual, soft, inevitable. But the truth, when it finally came, did not dawn gently. It split the sky. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, just days after the kiss that had changed everything. She and Grayson had settled into a quiet rhythm. There were no grand declarations, no talks of love. But the tension had lifted, replaced by something quiet and growing. He walked closer when he passed her in the hallway. She no longer kept her door closed at night. They shared dinners. They shared space, sometimes even laughter. The lines of their contract remained unspoken, more symbol than sentence now. But trust, Camilla was learning, wasn't built on gestures, alone. She was in the study that afternoon, searching through a drawer for a highlighter when her fingers brushed against a stack of folders, heavy, sleek, out of place. Legal briefs, she thought at first. But then she saw her name printed on the tab, Camilla Hart, pre-contract due diligence. Her breath caught. Slowly she opened the folder. Inside were documents dated before their marriage agreement, internal Wolf Corp memos, a background check, a financial risk assessment of her law firm, a psychological profile summary, even a confidential transcript of her court testimonies in a civil case from 3 years ago. Camilla flipped through the pages, each one colder than the last. She wasn't a partner. She was a calculation, a move made not after desperation but after research. Strategic positioning. Grayson had known exactly who she was long before that meeting in the boardroom. He hadn't chosen her out of convenience. He had chosen her because she fit the formula. Her fingers trembled. The walls of the room seemed to contract. Her skin itched with the burn of betrayal, sharp and familiar. She didn't wait. Grayson was in the dining area, a tablet in his hand and a glass of water beside him. He looked up when she entered, eyes softening as if he might greet her with a smile, until he saw her face. You did research on me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before we ever spoke? Grayson stood, the tablet forgotten. Camilla, you had a file on me, she said louder now. You investigated me like I was an acquisition. I didn't. It wasn't like that. She held up the folder. Then what was it? His silence was his answer. Camilla's chest heaved. I thought I was the one who compromised. The one who settled for a contract instead of love. But you knew who I was. You picked me because I was manageable, valuable, replaceable. No, he said quickly. Never replaceable. Her voice shook. You decided I was just enough of a risk to tolerate, but not enough to truly matter. You just didn't expect to start feeling anything. He stepped closer. Camilla, I didn't expect any of this. You were supposed to be a solution. Yes, I looked into your record. I needed someone the board would accept, someone clean, unshakable. But I didn't know I'd end up... He stopped himself. Her eyes narrowed. End up what, wanting to keep me? He flinched. I stayed when you were burning with fever, she said, tears rising. I defended you in boardrooms, in front of strangers, to your own ex. I broke my own rules because I thought maybe I wasn't just part of a plan anymore. You weren't, he said. You're not. Then why didn't you tell me? He hesitated. Because I was afraid that if I did, you'd never believe anything else was real. She laughed bitterly, the sound cracking. You were right. She left the room. Grayson didn't follow her. That night, the penthouse was quiet. No shared dinner, no evening talk on the terrace. Camilla stayed in her room, back pressed against the door like she was holding something inside that threatened to escape. She thought of every look, every gesture, every kiss. Had it all been part of the illusion? No. She knew the warmth in his voice, the way he held her hand in the hospital, the notes, the tulips, the quiet way he said her name when he thought she wasn't listening. But even real feelings couldn't erase a lie, especially not the kind that had been written into legal documents. The following morning, she dressed early and left before sunrise, returning to her father's home in Concord. The house was quiet, just as she remembered it, heavy with memories, the corners filled with old books and the faint smell of dried eucalyptus. Her father, surprised but gentle, asked no questions. Rachel called, confused, but Camilla said only that she needed time. She walked the forest trails behind the house that afternoon, trying to feel something other than hollow, and in her chest something whispered, "You trusted him." That was the worst part. Not that he had calculated her value, but that she had let herself be vulnerable, that she had believed finally she could fall. Grayson, for his part, sat in the empty penthouse that night with 2 untouched cups of tea on the counter. The Hias file still sat on the dining table, her handwriting scrawled across the cover in anger. He hadn't moved it. He thought about going after her. But what could he say? That he had chosen her for reasons that now embarrassed him. That what started as a transaction had become the only real thing left in his life. That he was for once afraid? He closed his eyes and imagined the scent of her hair on the pillow, the way she breathed when she slept, the rhythm of her laughter when she forgot to guard herself. He had never missed someone like this before, because he had never allowed himself to. And now, the very strategy that once made him untouchable had made him more alone than ever. Camilla stayed away for 10 days. 10 days of quiet mornings of coffee that tasted too bitter no matter the roast. 10 days of walking the orchard trail behind her father's house, of trying to put words to the ache that sat in her chest like an unwelcome guest. 10 days of replaying every conversation, every moment of tenderness, through the tainted lens of betrayal. She had always been good at surviving, at calculating risk, at compartmentalizing. But Grayson had never been part of her plan. She had let him in slowly, like water seeping through a crack in a dam. And when it burst, she didn't know who she was without the safety of distance. She told herself she had left because she needed clarity. But the truth was simpler. She had left because it hurt too much to stay. Her father noticed the quiet. Rachel called every night, and each time Camilla offered the same half-truths. I just need time. I'll come back when I'm ready. But one evening, as she sat beneath the old elm tree behind the house, her phone buzzed with a name she hadn't seen in days. Grayson. She stared at the screen. It buzzed again, then stopped. He didn't leave a message. Instead, minutes later, her email pinged. No subject. Just a single PDF file titled, "Before I Knew You." She opened it. Inside were scanned pages of something handwritten. Not typed, not formatted. Just his words, raw, scratched, uneven, almost like a journal. She hesitated. Then she read, Camilla, I never wanted to need anyone. When I was 12, my father taught me that needing people made you weak. He left my mother when her illness became inconvenient. I watched her crumble while he started a new life like we were a stain he could scrub away. I promised myself I would never let anyone close enough to do that to me. So I built my life in terms of gain and loss. Efficiency, risk, everything and everyone was categorized accordingly, including you. When the board suggested I marry, I laughed. Then I saw the opportunity. Not for love, for control. I did the research. I found you. A woman with a law firm on the edge, a spotless reputation, and more steel in her spine than most men I knew. I thought I was so clever, so untouchable. And then you became real. Not just capable, not just strategic, but warm, fierce, gentle. You made me want to say more than I should, stay in rooms I used to flee from. You made me remember what home could feel like. But I didn't know how to be honest, because I was terrified that the one person I didn't want to lose was someone I'd already betrayed. This isn't an apology letter. I know words aren't enough. This is just me. Stripped down. No suit, no shield. I miss you. I'm sorry. Camilla read it once, then twice, then again. She cried, but not because of the betrayal. She cried because she could see the boy inside the man, still running from a father's abandonment, still trying to build walls taller than his grief. That night she didn't sleep, and the next morning she didn't pack. Not yet, because there was still a part of her that wasn't ready to go back, not just to him, but to the version of herself who could forgive. But something shifted. She replied. Just 2 words. I heard you. Grayson sat in his office, sleepless, the city lights behind him blurred by the sheen of a winter drizzle. The reply came at 4:17 a.m. He didn't expect it. He read it in the silence. He didn't know what it meant, but it was something. He hadn't returned to the penthouse since she left. He couldn't. The empty rooms were too loud with her absence. He had thrown himself into work. Mergers, board prep, press statements. But none of it dulled the ache. For the first time in his adult life, he realized that success without someone to share it with felt like a hollow echo. He visited her father's office that week, not to see Camilla, but to thank the man who had raised her. Mr. Hart welcomed him in with a quiet nod. No pleasantries. Just a waiting silence. I came to apologize, Grayson said, for what I've done, and for not being the man your daughter deserved. Mr. Hart poured them tea. Do you know why Camilla took that deal with you? Grayson looked up. Because she needed to protect the firm. No, the older man said. She took it because she still believed people could be redeemed. She thought maybe, just maybe, you weren't like the men who used and discarded what they couldn't control. Grayson's throat tightened. I didn't deserve that faith, he whispered. Mr. Hart sipped his tea. Maybe not. But if you really want to earn it now, don't show her with promises. Show her with presence. Grayson nodded. Camilla returned to the city 3 days later, quietly. No fanfare, no announcements. She didn't go to the penthouse. She stayed at a hotel in Beacon Hill. She resumed a few cases at the firm. She answered Rachel's questions with careful restraint. She avoided Grayson, until she couldn't. The Wolf Foundation. Gala had been on the calendar for months, a massive event, a press-covered affair. Camilla had planned the legal coverage herself. She couldn't back out now, and she knew Grayson would be there. She wore a black satin dress, minimalist, sharp, strong, her armor. But when she entered the ballroom and saw him across the room in a charcoal suit, his eyes already searching for her, the armor cracked just slightly. He didn't approach at first. He waited. And when she finally turned toward the balcony, for air he followed. She heard his footsteps, then his voice. You came. She faced him. I had to. A beat. You look. He trailed off. Unbreakable. Camilla tilted her head. That's the point, isn't it? He didn't respond. She folded her arms. I read your letter. I didn't expect you to reply. I didn't reply because I forgave you, she said. I replied because I wanted you to know I saw the man behind the mistake. He looked down. But that doesn't mean I trust you. she added. I know, and I don't know if we can fix this. I don't either, he said, but I'm willing to try, without strategy, without performance, just as me. Her eyes searched his, and for the first time she saw the boy who had never been taught how to love without fear. She sighed. Don't chase me, Grayson. He blinked. I won't. Then don't let me go. He stepped closer. I don't plan to. The first snowfall came early that year. It dusted the brownstones of Boston in quiet white, softened the sharp edges of the city, and covered everything in the kind of silence that asked for reflection. Camilla stood at the window of her office, watching it fall. The world outside looked new, untouched, but she didn't feel untouched. She felt rearranged, as if every cell in her body had been rewritten in the past few months, by grief, by love, by disappointment, by growth. Her heart still bore the bruise of what Grayson had done, but time had begun to wrap its gentle hands around it, reshaping the pain into something less sharp, something bearable. He hadn't pressured her since the gala. No calls, no surprise visits. He kept his distance, but not coldly, not like before. He sent flowers once, not roses, irises, purple and delicate, the kind her mother used to keep on their kitchen counter. No note. He left a book at her front desk, The Art of Being Human. A line was underlined in pencil. Forgiveness is not the erasure of history. It's the decision to believe someone can be more than their worst moment. And once, just once, she caught sight of him on the other side of a courtroom, leaving a settlement meeting. He didn't approach, but he looked at her like she still mattered, like he hadn't stopped hoping. Camilla was learning something too, that healing didn't always come in declarations or perfect apologies. Sometimes it came in space, in allowing the truth to breathe, in rediscovering who you were without the weight of someone else's choices, but some choices couldn't be outrun forever. It was Rachel who finally asked the question that had lived quietly in Camilla's mind for weeks. Do you love him? They were walking along the river, snow falling lightly around them. Camilla kept her hands in her coat pockets. I don't know if that's the right question, she said. Rachel gave her a look. Why not? Because love isn't the problem. Trust is, Rachel nodded thoughtfully. So, do you still believe he can earn it? Camilla didn't answer. Not then. A week later, a courier arrived at her office. No return address, just her name in bold lettering. Inside was a formal envelope, handwritten, and a small key. She opened the letter with steady hands. Camilla, I know we've said almost everything we could say, and I know that words have limits, so this isn't a plea. It's an invitation. 1 year ago, we signed a contract in that cold, impersonal boardroom with every intention of pretending our way through 6 months. We thought we were being clever, strategic, emotionless. But then life happened. This key opens the back garden of my mother's old house. I've been rebuilding it, quietly. It's not perfect. Neither am I. But if you still believe in second chances, even slightly, I'd like you to meet me there this Sunday at noon. No press, no performance, no expectations. Just us. Whatever you choose, I will respect it. You don't owe me anything. But if you come, I promise I will never treat your love like a transaction again. Camilla sat for a long time after reading it, the letter trembling in her lap like it was alive. She knew the house. He had mentioned it once in a rare moment, of vulnerability. It was where his mother had gardened every weekend, even when her body had failed her. He hadn't set foot there in years. Until now. Sunday arrived with a thin sun and snow that had melted just enough to dampen the city. Camilla drove herself, alone, winding through quiet neighborhoods until she reached the house tucked near Cambridge's edge. It was old, modest, not the kind of place one would associate with Grayson Wolfe, but it had a soul. She opened the gate with the key. The path curved toward a walled garden in the back. Red brick, frost-kissed vines, the hint of dormant tulips beneath the soil. And he was there, standing beneath the bare-limbed magnolia tree, coat unbuttoned, scarf loose, hands in his pockets, like he didn't know what to do with them. He turned the moment he heard her footsteps. His eyes met hers. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He waited. She crossed the space slowly, carefully, like the ground might break if she wasn't gentle enough. When she stopped a few feet from him, the silence between them was not tense but reverent. A quiet shared by two people who had walked through their own ruins and met again in the clearing. "This place is beautiful," she said softly. "It was hers," he said. "I wanted to keep something that reminded me what love looked like, when it was real." She looked down, then back up. "I got your letter. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't." His voice was quiet. "Why did you?" "Because I believe you're trying," she said. "And because I'm tired of punishing myself for letting someone in." He took a step closer. "Camilla, I can't erase what I did, but I want to rewrite everything that comes next." She studied him. "I need more than promises. I know. I need patience, truth, room to be angry if I need to be." "You can have all of it," he said. "I don't need a perfect ending. I just want to be the man who stands beside you while you write the rest of your life." Pause. "I don't want to marry you again because I have to," he said. "I want to marry you because I choose to. This time without contracts, without fear. Only if you'll have me." Camilla's heart twisted. "You didn't bring a ring, did you?" she asked, a tremble in her voice. He smiled then, soft and unguarded. "No, just brought myself." She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his waist and let her forehead rest against his chest. Grayson exhaled like a man finally able to breathe. Neither of them said the word love that day. They didn't need to. The garden said it for them. 6 months later, they married again. No gala, no boardroom, no tabloids. Just a small chapel in Vermont, Rachel cried. Mr. Hart gave her away. Grayson's best man was a colleague who had watched him transform wordlessly over the last year. Camilla wore a simple white dress. Grayson wore the same watch he had the first time they met. They said their vows under an open sky, with snow still clinging to the edges of the chapel roof. This time they made no promises they couldn't keep. Just one, to begin again. Every day, together. Camilla Hart's story began as a calculated compromise. An ambitious woman entering a 6-month contract marriage to save her law firm and protect her family's legacy. On the surface, it was a business deal. No love, no strings, no emotions. But beneath the contract and behind the quiet strength she wore like armor, Camilla was a woman who had spent her life carrying the weight of others, never asking for help, never expecting softness. Grayson Wolfe, on the other hand, was a man of power and precision, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, groomed by trauma to see people as assets and emotions as liabilities. He chose Camilla not out of affection, but because she fit a profile, smart, clean, and easy to control. But what he didn't anticipate was her spirit, her empathy, her refusal to be anyone's puppet. What followed was not a fairy tale, but something braver. 2 broken people, learning to communicate, to trust, to care. Camilla collapsed not just from exhaustion, but from the invisible burden of pretending to be invincible. Grayson, for the first time, let go of control long enough to let love in. Yet just as they began to grow closer, Camilla discovered the truth behind how she had been selected, and everything shattered. What makes this story powerful isn't the betrayal. It's what came after. Grayson didn't win her back with wealth or flowers. He did it with patience, honesty, and change. And Camilla didn't forgive blindly. She stepped away, healed, and then chose to return when she was ready, not to fix him, but to stand beside a man who had learned to show up differently. The lesson? Love, real love, isn't about perfection or timing. It's about presence, about choosing each other even after the masks fall off, about knowing that trust once broken isn't rebuilt with words, it's rebuilt with actions, time, and humility. For anyone watching this who has ever been let down or struggled to open their heart again, Camilla and Grayson's journey is a reminder that second chances aren't about forgetting the past, but about being brave enough to write a new one. Your turn. Let's hear from you. Question. When someone hurts you deeply but genuinely tries to change, what would you most likely do? A. Give them a second chance but slowly. B. Protect yourself and walk away for good. Comment A or B below. There's no right answer. We'd love to know where your heart stands. What about you? Have you ever given someone a second chance or walked away from something you once believed in? Share your story in the comments. We're building a space for honest, thoughtful reflection, and your voice might inspire someone else going through the same thing. Enjoyed this story? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more heartfelt, powerful narratives like this. Let's keep telling the stories that remind us we're never truly alone. See you in the next video.